始まりました。
始まってます。
月見ストーチ、おはよう。
じゃあもう始めて大丈夫ですかね、これは。
じゃあ、大丈夫。どうなんだろう。みんなの時計が違うのかな。
時間まで
私まだ10時になってないんだけど。
そうですね、西尾さんが時間まであと1分だそうで。でも今8時になった。
すごい。8人ってうちら全員かな。もうちょっと人が増えるまで待っても大丈夫じゃない？
そうですね。
ああ、いいね。YouTube で見えるんですね。
見えるんですね。
じゃあ8時1分ぐらいから、
はい。
もう1分だ。
うん。いいんじゃない？大丈夫。始めましょう。
そうですね。じゃあ始めましょうか。So, hello everyone. Thank you all for coming to the third Miruku Yuntaku stream. Our topic today is Ryukyu, Okinawa, and our roots. Subtopic is Beyond Historical Trauma and Towards the Future. For the schedule of today, we are using the Japanese Standard Time. So if you're watching from another time zone, like EST, where I am located, please adjust accordingly. We will start with a self-introduction of the four participants of today, each taking about max 5 minutes. So starting from me, my name is Sean Hewitt. I will be the facilitator for today's stream. Nice to meet you all. I was born in Okinawa. I spent 10 years there, and I moved to the United States East Coast in around 2008. Here, I participate in several Okinawan organizations like Kenji Igei and other ASA groups around the Washington, D.C. area. And I also practice Sanshin on my own time and perform with the Kenji Igei as well. I have done Uchinanchu junior studies in Okinawa in 2016 and went back to volunteer afterwards several times. And I went to Niseta Tour in Brazil earlier this year. With those experiences alongside international Okinawan communities, I began to think more and more about the Okinawan culture, how it's modernizing, and how to keep the traditions and to keep the balance together with that. I'm very thankful for the chance to be involved in this event, and I am very excited to be here. Thank you. Okay. And next, 自己紹介. Kenji, if you can introduce yourself.
Of course. Hai sai gusuyo cho kanabira wangne igei Kenji yaebin yuta sarugutu unige sabira. My name is Kenji. I am from Peru. I'm very excited to be here. I'm 33 years old. My Oji-chan's homeland is Ginoza. And I had the opportunity to go there about 5 years ago. And this trip was really, really special for me because I found in a different way my roots. And in this case, well, I started to think about my origins and about Okinawa and how this impact in my life. And in this case, well, I started to write a song, and this made me link my own roots and the art of the music. So since there, I try to think about my roots, but through music. And last year I released an album Uchinanchu Jaibin, and most of these songs are about Okinawa and being Nikkei, and I think these messages can help other people to also think about their origins and start also trying to work hard, because maybe our roots, our culture, if it's not like special for us, maybe in a couple of generations it won't be special for anyone. So we have to start right now with events like this. So I'm very excited to be here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kenji. So next, Linda, if you could introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you everyone and good morning. And my name is Lima Linda Tokumori, and my father is Peru Uchinanchu. He is third Nikki, and I was born in Okinawa and grew up in Okinawa also. But since I was student of Ryukyu University, I noticed or I learned about the history of Okinawa and learned about the history of a migrant, Okinawan migrant, and I awared my migrant identity, Nikkei identity, and I started to learn about the Uchinanchu Nikkei or Uchinanchu migrants history. Then later, I had a experience to work in the U.S. military base in Okinawa, and also I studied about the U.S. military base issue or situation of Okinawa. Then in 2016, I went to Colombia of the South America to work to support the victim of the conflict there as a volunteer staff. Then later, I went to Peru in Lima City. I worked a year, and during that time, I had a relation with Okinawa Kenji Igei there to support elder person, and I teach Uchinaguchi, Shimakutuba there, learn together with Peru Uchinanchu people. Then at that time, 2018, with David, today's presenter, we had a conference about the Battle of Okinawa and the trauma of Battle of Okinawa also. And with that experience, I thought like many Uchinanchu diaspora or Uchinanchu migrant people in the world need to know or want to know about the history of Battle of Okinawa and the impact to today also. So I and Yuto-san or Keiko-san as a friend started this Milk Yuntaka activity this year. And now I'm working in Japan and recently started new activity as a online teacher to teach history of Okinawa or situation of Okinawa today. So I'm really glad to be here today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Linda. And finally, David, please go ahead.
はい、みんな愛さぐすよ。君そうりょ。ワンネ、君デイビッドやいびん。うちなんかやいびんでも、ワンウヤや、韓国から、うちなからで、スコットランドからチャービタン。国からゆたしく、うにげさびら。All right, so hello everyone. My name is David Kim. My Okinawan name is Asato. And my roots here in Okinawa are in Kitanakagusuku and Misato, Okinawa-shi. Let's see. So I grew up without really knowing that we were Okinawan. So until I was about maybe 20, 21, I thought that we were Japanese. Which seemed normal in, Chicago and Minnesota in the Midwest of America. But somehow, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in my presentation, we came to understand, me and my brother, that we are Uchinanchu. And it's kind of an amazing journey, like so many of us all over the world have experienced in the diaspora, of like coming to understand where we're from, and how Okinawa always seems to call us back in a way, in ways that we don't always understand. I could never have imagined being here in Okinawa 10 years ago. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation. But let's see, in 2013, I attended my first Wakamono Taikai in Los Angeles, which was just blew my mind that there were young people, Uchinanchu young people from all over the world who wanted to hang out, and who welcomed me like I was like family. Like I know we say Ichari Bachode, but I really felt that the first time we went in to that room, and I saw all these young, teenage and 20-year-old Okinawans from Okinawa, South America, the US, Hawaii. And then from there, my brother started the Minnesota Kenyan Guy, and I was the vice president on there. And then we have like a small group of about 50 Okinawans in Minnesota, and we meet for some parties every year, especially one in the summer. And it's pretty much these four to five 70, 80-year-old Okinawan ladies who sit around a table and still speak Uchinaguchi in Minnesota, which is quite something to see. So yeah, and from there, I'll talk a little bit about it later, but I got into holistic healing, studied homeopathy for 4 years, which is a big part of my presentation today, and eventually moved here to Okinawa in 2019 to learn Japanese and really get to know this place. So, じゃあ、栗からウニゲサビラ。
Okay, thank you, David. And with the self-introductions done, we will start with David's presentation, and which is scheduled for about 30 minutes. After that, we will start Kurosu Yuntaku from 10:50 with Linda and Kenji joining us, where we respond to viewer comments and discuss the presentation topics between the participants. After that, Kenji will perform Nuchi du Takara, and we should be done around 11:40 or so. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please feel free to comment it below. Okay, and with that, David, if you can start your presentation.
Great, yes. So, hello everyone who is watching on YouTube and who watches this later, and I'm sure we have people from all over the world, as is usual for Okinawans. So, I'm here in Tomegusku, Okinawa now. And let's see, so we have about 30 minutes, so let's get into it. Before we start, I just wanted to take a moment and say that it's a heavy topic, trauma. And there's some really difficult parts of trauma that can arise when we discuss things like this, when we discuss things like the war, the Battle of Okinawa, the loss of Uchinaguchi, and all of the things that we've faced all over the world, immigrants in South America, Hawaii, North America, and just like all that's in us, all the memory, the experience that we feel in our bodies and in like our memories that have been passed on from our parents and grandparents. So I just want to recognize that. And so as you listen, that this might bring up things that are heavy, or bring up a sadness, or a deep, an anger, or all of these different emotions that sometimes have been long buried. So just to be gentle with yourselves as you listen, that this is like a long journey, that healing is this complex part of the world that is so full of life and beauty, and also can be really hard to go into. So as you're watching, if you need a break, like take a break, it's like a lot to digest. And then also during the cross Yuntaku, if you have something that you want to share from your own experience, please share that on the YouTube questions and any experiences that you want to just share so that we can all kind of hear those and listen, because I think our voices as Okinawans really matter. Good. So today, we are going to get into the topic of healing and trauma and what these together mean for our future. So I believe that healing is probably the most important aspect of creating the future that we want to live in, a future that maybe we can't even imagine now. But that healing is also one of the most underestimated and even ignored because of the discomfort and the difficulty that sometimes comes up when we talk about the past. So today I want to just kind of go through my experience in the clinic, working with people one-on-one, and then connect that to research from neuroscience, specifically the field of neuroscience, to see what it might tell us about how actually the past and the present and the future are related, and how moving towards our future together kind of requires and calls us to look back into our past and integrate that past so that we can move forward. All right, so I'll tell a little bit of story. Like I said, I grew up in the Midwest of America. I was born in Canada, Vancouver, but then quickly moved to the East Coast of the United States, to the Virginia area, and then spent most of my childhood in Chicago and Minneapolis. So let's see. So I'm Kim. This is from my dad's side. My dad is half Okinawan, half Korean. And my grandfather was actually born in what is now North Korea. So this kind of mixed experience growing up in America is really a part of my story. And like Lima said, and Sean, who have both spent time away from Okinawa, there's so much that comes up with these mixed roots and living in different places and how we kind of understand ourselves. Me being in the Midwest of America with Korean, Okinawan, and Scottish roots. So like I said, I didn't know we were Okinawan until I was about 20 or 21. And the way that happened is my brother was in a lecture on East Asian history. And this German-American lecturer made it a point to say that Okinawa is not Japan. That Okinawa has its own history, was its own kingdom, and has its own culture and language. And for some reason, this stuck out to my brother, and he went home and asked my dad, "So, Dad, are we Okinawan?" And my dad said, "Oh, yeah, of course. That's why he's so hairy." As if it was nothing, right? So my brother was about 18, 19 at the time. And we had lived almost our whole lives at that point just without having any understanding about Okinawa. And yet, this one lecture with this German-American professor decided to really make a point that Okinawa is different. And this led to us becoming interested in Okinawa, getting connected to the Kenjinkai and the Wakamono Taikai, and really led to me being here. So somehow Okinawa seems to call us back, and it's something that I don't quite understand, but for some reason this professor led us on this journey. And I think this is something that so many of us in the diaspora can resonate with, is this call of Okinawa to come back. We have the Kenshusei, the Kempi, these return programs that I don't see anywhere else in the world in terms of the connection between the diaspora and the homeland. So it's an amazing thing. So that's how I ended up here. Now, okay, so let's get into trauma. But before that, if you're listening and you're sitting somewhere, let's just take a moment and kind of, we can do, we call it meditation or meso or meditación, and just take a moment and kind of feel into your body Maybe let things settle a bit. Take a few deep breaths. Just connect to this rhythm of the breath. Breath that was with all of our ancestors who were breathing, whether they were in Okinawa or South America, North America. And just to kind of feel the body, the breath. Just to notice what's there. And then notice also any emotions that are with you now. Joy, sadness, anger, shame, fear, whatever's there. And then just to check in quickly with the mind. What's happening in the mind? Is it fast? Lots of thoughts, full? Or is it slower, open? Good. And then whenever you're ready, just to come back. Feel the body. Good. So as we kind of go through trauma and healing, and also that'll be like the three parts. We'll look at what trauma is, and then the process of healing and what symptoms and disease tell us about the process of healing. And then we'll talk about the future, what we might see in Okinawa, what collective healing might look like for all of us. And as we're listening, just to notice, like we did this little reflection, meditation, that like what happens in your body or emotions and mind as you listen, because this is like important information that tells us about how we're responding to what we're seeing. And actually, this is like a really important part of healing, is to notice what's happening inside of us as we see, as we read or listen or witness. Yeah, good. So trauma comes from the Greek word, which means wound, which is defined, trauma is defined in the dictionary as a distressing or disturbing experience. And what's characteristic about trauma is that, one, it overwhelms the nervous system. So trauma is always an overwhelming experience that's too much for us to handle, whether that's from abuse or war or even an experience with a friend that it's just too intense, that this can cause us to, the nervous system is overwhelmed and part of it shuts down. And then the other part of trauma is that it persists long after. So trauma happens as an event, and then we experience the symptoms of trauma years, even decades after it happened. And so trauma actually, like it's understood as this kind of word that is like a part of us that's like a negative experience, right? But actually trauma as a response in us is really an intelligence of our system. Like when we experience an event that is too much, our nervous system closes down and actually protects us. So in some way, we can see trauma as a hero, right? Like it's our system knew what to do in that situation. Like if I was a kid and my father was violent, or I grew up in a household that was unstable, I knew that I had to withdraw in a way in order to protect myself from too much violence outside. And in that way, trauma is like this beautiful part of us that's intelligent. And all of our ancestors who went through experiences that were overwhelming developed this kind of response. And the only thing about trauma is that if it's not revisited and integrated and healed, then it just stays with us. So it's as if we were still responding to that experience when we were 5 or 10, or even the experience of our ancestors. And in that way, it prevents us from being here and moving forward. So let's talk about neuroscience, right? Because in the brain, it might seem to us like in our everyday lives, we experience time as this kind of thing as like, oh, now is now, right? Like today it's 10:25 a.m. here in Okinawa, and that seems normal, right? This is time now. But in our brains, if we actually go and look at the brain scans that you can see here, the brain doesn't necessarily recognize here and now as right now always. And so let me kind of explain, right? Because in the brains of people with PTSD, we see that when they revisit the memories of the traumatizing experience, their brain reacts in the exact same way as if it were in that moment. So we talk about these as triggers, right? People with PTSD often will have like a smell or something that reminds them of their trauma, and their brains will actually go into the response of shutdown or hyperactivation that is exactly as if they were there in that moment in the car accident, or as if they were in the moment where they were beaten. Or it brings them back to the time when they were in a childhood and they were afraid that they might not survive. So in this way, neuroscience shows us that actually the past is present. And so when we are in an experience of post-traumatic stress or a flashback or relapse, or also in the nightmares that we often see in PTSD, it's as if that were now. So the brain shows us that actually past and present are not separate, but in trauma, they actually come together and we are locked in the past. And so we actually, when we're in that state, we can't move forward because our brains are actually in a response that's from when we were a child. So in that way, we don't have a future. And it's not like to be like all negative and we don't have any future in general. But if our brain is actually locked in the response to trauma, we don't have a way to move forward. There is actually no neurological possibility. So our brain can't move out of what happened. And this is why for the future, we need healing. And I've seen this in the clinic so many times. Patients will talk about this one event when they were 6 years old that they can't get over. It's like every spring or every May or something happens, and they go back exactly to that same experience when they were 6 years old. So in this way, it's like a freezer. Trauma is like this freezer. And you can see here, we have all this frozen food, and it keeps the food hard and tucked away. So it also requires so much energy to keep food frozen, right? And so trauma is very similar. Like when we have trauma, it takes a lot of energy in our system to not have that affect us every day, because it's doing a good job actually. Because if that trauma was with us every day and we are just reacting to the trauma every minute, we can't live. So our body devotes a lot of energy to keep that trauma down and tucked away so we can live our daily lives. But I think this is actually a big reason we have so much fatigue today. So many people who are sleepy chronically or just don't have energy. That this is a major part of that condition, is that trauma is actually being we are using our body's electricity to keep trauma frozen. Good. Now there's a few key symptoms of trauma. One is what we often see in PTSD is dissociation. So people actually can't feel anymore. So just as in the moment of violence or trauma, their nervous system shut down, it's as if it's still shut down, and also the good parts of life are shut down, like the experiences of taste or smell or hearing, that these things actually are often not very acute. The senses are dulled, and the patient will often talk about, I am not really here. Or even sometimes they won't even understand that they're not here. It's as if they kind of, right? Like we have these moments where it's like, we're kind of not really here. And this is a key symptom of trauma. So while trauma does in a helpful way to the system, where our system shuts down the negative experiences of fear and terror and like the possibility of death or injury, it also shuts down the parts of life that are alive and, you know, smell, taste, sense. So this is one key portion of trauma. The other is hyperactivity or hyper reactivity, where we see like this, oh my God, am I okay? You know, always watching, the hypervigilance, where it's like, oh, if I see someone on the street, it's like I have to watch them, right? So this is the other side of hyperactivation, of always being on alert to see what danger may be. And then another interesting part of trauma is that people often get lost, because in our cortex, the front part of the brain is where we keep the hippocampus is, which is how our brain tracks where we are. It's how we figure out where to go. It's how we keep ourselves orientated. So it's how we say, oh, I know how to get home from here. That's happening in the hippocampus, which is in the front part of the brain. In trauma or PTSD, that part of the brain is often shrunk and oftentimes very shut down. And so in a way, it's as if we lose where we are in trauma. And on a more metaphorical level, I think we can understand this as like, when we are traumatized as people, individuals, and as collective, it's as if we can't find our way home. It's as if we don't know how to locate ourselves, where we are. And we see this in just even in all the talk that we have about Okinawans as identity. Like, who are we? Where do we belong? Like, where is home? And when we don't have our language or some of our traditions, like, how do we kind of locate ourselves in the world? And interestingly, that part of the brain, the hippocampus and the surrounding areas, are really connected to story, memory, and space. And so in a way, it's like the stories that we tell about ourselves, how we locate ourselves, who we identify ourselves as in relation to the land around us and the world around us. This is all impacted by a really similar part of the brain that gets shut down during trauma. Okay, Sean, how am I doing on time? Are we about halfway?
We started. You're still good.
Okay, great. So briefly, let's talk about collective trauma, because individual trauma and collective trauma are quite similar. And what science in the field of epigenetics has shown is that actually trauma is passed on from generation to generation. So the grandparents' experience impacts on a genetic and physiological level, like in our bodies. We are affected by the trauma that our parents and grandparents went through. And they found this in studies of mice as well. So when mice, are traumatized in the lab, they find that the kids are affected right? Like, so the parents show signs of trauma, depression, lower activity, difficulty relating to other mice. And they also find that the kids also experience the same exact symptoms. Now, what's interesting is that if they take mice that have been traumatized, the parents, and they take the kids away from their parents, and those kids are raised by other healthy, non-traumatized mice parents, those kids also show the same symptoms. So in some way, trauma is being transmitted that's out, like beyond the upbringing or the environment. So something in us, in our genes or epigenetics, is being transmitted even when we're being raised in a healthy environment. And we see this oftentimes in stories of Jewish people, the descendants of the Holocaust, even people who didn't know that their parents or grandparents were in Auschwitz or the concentration camps. So we see that there are stories of Jewish people who have nightmares about being in a concentration camp, and they never knew about their ancestors being there, but somehow that memory is transmitted. And so collective trauma, these big events like Holocaust, war, genocide, in some way it's transmitted to generations beyond, and we're still figuring that out as science. But on a collective level, the symptoms of trauma show up in like our relationships, our conversations, the way we talk to each other, things that we don't even really understand, like trauma becomes embedded in the culture. And then also, we see it even the way we build things, architecture, the way we structure our politics and government, even like national health, like obesity rates or heart disease. These are all connected to collective trauma. And we can start to see them as we become more aware and have more kind of an awakening, like events like these. And people like Uchinanchu who are starting to talk about what did the Battle of Okinawa do to us? Okay, so we can see here's the generations. And of course, as Okinawans, we've experienced several collective traumas. Most recently, the burning, the destruction of Shuri Castle. And before that, the Battle of Okinawa, the presence of military bases, the violence of American soldiers to Okinawans here. And then before that, the cultural genocide of wiping out Uchinaguchi and Okinawan traditions. Okay, so I'm going to try to go quickly for healing, because healing kind of, like I'm talking from my experience as a homeopath in the clinic, right? So healing is this thing that we talk about a lot, and there's so many different ways of seeing healing. And oftentimes the dominant way of seeing healing is that disease is a problem. We need to get rid of the symptoms, and then we are healed or cured. But actually, if we go to the Japanese for the kanji for genki, for health, we see that it's actually telling us something about what health is, right? Because we see here genki, the gen is moto, means original here on the left. And then ki being life force. So health, like wellness, when we say genki desu ka, it's actually, we are asking, is your life in its original movement? Like we can see here in the tulip, like the tulip, when it's in its original movement, it just blooms and that's it. It's beautiful as it is, right? And we would say, this is genki. This is the original movement of the tulip. It's following the code that was already written into it. And so if we understand health and on that level, disease actually becomes a teacher. So symptoms actually are a language of the vital force, the ki, our chi. And they are telling us how what is not in our original movement. So what is not genki? And we can see this here in kind of a very simple drawing, where genki is like, yeah, we're in flow. the Chinese philosophers would call this like we are in the flow of the Tao. And disease or byoki is when we get trauma or difficult events in our life cause us to get out of flow. Now, in conventional medicine, we see, so these are symptoms, right? And so when the vital force or our chi gets out of rhythm, we have symptoms. We have things like that come up in our emotions or physical symptoms or mental symptoms. And that's how the body shows us that something is wrong. So healing then is the restoration of the original movement. So it's bringing the body and the life force back into that sway that we see in Genki. And there's different ways to see this, right? In conventional medicine, like with drugs and which are wonderful at times, surgery, the way it works is that we identify the symptoms and we block them. We say symptoms are bad, so we need to erase these. Like when you take some normal medicine, it usually helps with the pain of the headache, but it doesn't always help the root cause. Homeopathy and holistic healing says, okay, we see these symptoms, and actually, can we understand these precisely and match them with this similar energy? And that brings us back to Genki. So instead of like we often hear like we are waging a war against coronavirus, right? Or we have to wage a war against cancer and we have to defeat it. All of these like words that kind of talk about war and defeat and the enemy. But actually, if we understand disease as a teacher, we can approach it very differently. So there are 3 ingredients of healing that I've seen in the clinic. And before this, there's like this starting point that we can see in Genki, like in the kanji of Genki, the original movement, that all of us have this kind of life force underneath all of the trauma, all of the symptoms, that we all have like we know this, right? Like when we feel like most alive, or we feel like we are just in flow, or we see someone who we know who's just, they're doing what they're meant to do here, that this is flow. This is the state of being in our original movement. And when we see healing, like in the clinic, when I work with patients and we make progress towards healing, we often see symptoms go away, but we often also see the person come more into themselves. It's like they are more themselves. They are more their original, like I am being more of my original me is something that I hear a lot. And life, like just in the code of our universe, life wants to heal. Like this is a part of our world. Whenever, like when we get a cut, we actually heal very quickly. When we see like different parts of nature, animals, that in some way they're always like the natural state of things is to get hurt and come back into health. So we have this support of the way the whole universe works, which is that even in the stars, we see them explode and become and die as stars do, and then come back into new life. And we see it also in the cycle of the seasons, right? We go from fall to winter, and we see death, and then we see life come in the spring. So healing is always a part of what's happening in our world. And what I've seen in the clinic is that there's 3 ingredients of healing. One is precision, like the ability to really tune into the disease and know, like when you talk to someone sometimes and you have a problem and you share it with them and it's like they really get it. Like we all know this experience. Like we talk to someone, maybe a good grandma, and you say, I have this problem with my friend, I don't know what to do. And it's like she really can step into that experience with you and feel it. And in the clinic, in homeopathy, we understand this as we choose one remedy out of 5,000. So the precision there is so different than just having one prescription for everything, right? Good. Second is space. We have to have the space to be able to like receive the disease or receive the, like look into the trauma and have enough room inside to say, okay, I feel that. I can really receive the fullness of, wow, like today is Ire no Hi, like if it during Ire no Hi, to really look at the battle and look at what we've been through as Okinawans and really have the space to feel it inside. And then lastly is love. This kind of, like in the clinic when patients say, they often share things that are difficult, yeah? Like healing requires the love to say, okay, yes, share with me these dark things and I will embrace them without judgment. That you can share these and that's okay. So collectively, kind of one image of healing is the Sankofa bird, which is this bird that walks towards the future while looking back. And it's a word from Ghana, which means to go back and take, or to go back and reclaim what was lost. And I think it's a lovely image for us as Okinawans as we move move forward towards our future, and also look back towards what has happened here and in the diaspora. Great. So I think I'm running out of time, but I want to just briefly touch on the future, right? Because as we kind of in this image, as we go into the darkness and look into our past and are with our past, and we feel like the past in our bodies, emotions, minds, and return to that past like the Sankofa bird together, the possibilities that arise when trauma is released, like when those old frozen traumas are melted and that energy that was used to keep them frozen is released, it's like creativity beyond what we can ever imagine, right? And I see this in the clinic, like patients who finally are able to move on from the abuse of their father. And they say, yes, that was a difficult time. And it's like not to forget it, but to integrate it. And then the kinds of creativity and new things and like people finding new careers or new things they want to do, or just the way that they come into the clinic and say, I don't know what's going on, but there's something new and alive in me. It's an incredible thing to watch. And I think the same is true for us as a collective. Like when we look back together into the depths of our history and all that we've been through, it's like there's more space that's created inside for us to move forward with joy and creativity and purpose. And oftentimes I think it's like worlds open, futures open that were before then impossible to even envision. So we don't really know what the full potential of Okinawa is. And this is kind of how I want to close, is like, we've been through so much as a people, our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. And the past is, it's a tough past. You know, we've been through all kinds of things. And I think Kenji's song will speak to this a bit. But we also, I don't think we know the full potential of Okinawa. I don't think we even can imagine what the future might be like in a healed, integrated Okinawa. If we do this work, if we choose to do this work of healing the past and moving towards a future together. And I have some ideas. So I want to just close with some ideas, right? Because I think about the future of Okinawa all the time, being here, living here, you know, looking out here over the ocean and over the farmlands of Tomigusku. Because I think we're moving into a world where the little things, the small places, the tiny countries of the world will actually play a much bigger role in our future. Like just like we have in the nuclear age where we have nuclear power and these tiny atoms have the energy to either power the world or blow it up. Like we have this capacity in the little places. And Okinawa is one of the smallest places on Earth. And I think we're moving towards a world where these places like Okinawa will actually play a much bigger role in global politics, global economy. And I really don't know how. But I think that there is a parallel to nuclear energy and the small things of the world for our collective future. We also have in Okinawa these secrets of a long life. You know, we have more 100-year-olds than anywhere or than most places in the world. And we still don't really know why. People have done all these studies. But I think actually this might be this way of living that we see the grandmas up in Ookimi or up in Yambaru in the north of Okinawa, that their way of living, I think actually can show the world some secrets of life that are still kind of undiscovered in this world where we're all racing around trying to make whatever money and fly across the world so many times in a year and whatever. So this is another part. And then lastly, I think that, I don't know where this came from, but I actually think that Okinawa could be like the Geneva of Asia, right? Geneva, Switzerland, this place of democracy, diplomacy, banking. It's the place where all of the, like so many of the human rights conventions have been written and signed, contracts and treaties between countries after the wars because of its neutrality in Europe. I think Okinawa can become a Geneva of Asia. And it sounds crazy, but I think this is the kind of possibility that we might see in our future if we do the work of healing and looking into our past and together integrating the traumas of our history as Okinawans. So this is the journey that I think actually a lot of us will be called to as we move forward into the future. This journey of like this group of Miruku Yuntaku, looking into memory and the past, and then also imagining what our future might be together. So that's it. Maybe let's just take a breath. And I know it was like a lot of information, like really condensed, but just to take a breath and maybe digest for a minute. And then Sean will lead us into our cross conversation.
Okay, thank you, David, for the wonderful presentation. Okay, so let's take, as David said, a little bit of a breather, kind of taking the material all in, trying to understand it and apply it to our topic of today. Okay. And now I believe we can move on to Cross Yuntaku, where, as I mentioned before, we will discuss about the topic between the participants, and we will also take viewer comments and respond to them. Okay, so I think Linda, you had some material that gave a little bit more context about Battle of Okinawa and PTSD. If you could share that.
You're asking me?
はい、そう、ごめん。 沖縄戦の PTSD のことに関しての
Okay.
追加の発表
Yeah, sure.
があるのでお願いします。
My topic is not as a presentation. Just I want to share about the information of the trauma due to Battle of Okinawa. And I think in YouTube there is a link of the handout about this. Google Drive link. So audience, please see from this link. And yeah, actually about 10 years ago, one psychologist of the Okinawa, he found some symptoms from the elderly person who experienced the Battle of Okinawa. And the point is they, after the war, they don't have these symptoms like nightmare or like felt pain when before they sleep or like that. They during the after the battle after the war, because they have a lot of difficulty to survive or to live. They were really busy to grow up their children or family or like that. No? So at that time they forget the trauma of the battle of Okinawa. But when they become elderly person, they remembered when the memory of when they were child, and then like they 悩まされるって何で言うんだっけ？悩まされる。
Be conflicted?
Yeah, they have a lot of conflict of the pain of their body or like that with the memory of the Battle of Okinawa, and then they started to call this trauma as a PTSD of the Battle of Okinawa. And you said they in 2012 they had a big survey to the survivor of the Battle of Okinawa, and about the 40% of the elderly person who experienced the Battle of Okinawa have these symptoms of PTSD. And it's almost past the 67 years at that time, and now is after the 78 years from the war. But even today, more and more many people are suffering of this trauma, because this trauma will be not directed. Year by year, they more easily to remember these shock memories. And another point is about the existence of the U.S. military base in Okinawa, because after the war, Okinawa still today have a huge institutes of the military base, the United States, and the daily training of like aircraft or shooting training, and these like sounds or landscape make the elderly persons to remember of the battlefield, and it will be triggered to remember their trauma. Then so there are like two points. The still elderly person who experienced Battle of Okinawa has a trauma, and there is a relationship with U.S. military bases. And if I can continue through the presentation of David, I thought, because David mentioned about the ingredients of healings, the precision and space of love, this subjects are important, but for a long time, nobody knows the existence of the trauma of due to Battle of Okinawa, and I think there are many persons who suffered about the memory, about the this pain, but people can't explain because they didn't know why they are suffering. Right? Then there was no space nor love, because many of these people are more like have a severe experience, like they lost their family or neighbors in the world, and therefore they had a pain. So, but still, little people knows or think about these facts. Yeah, I think like today is really important opportunity to know and to think. Thank you.
No, thank you, Lena. That was very informative and that was good. Personally, I think that PTSD due to Battle of Okinawa has been significantly overlooked. And even for my grandmother, who's a survivor of Battle of Okinawa, she's told me stories about it, but she doesn't really like remembering and really going back to those moments. And I think a lot of survivors are like that with their children and grandchildren, but most of the times it's kind of brushed off as like, oh, they've had a hard experience. It's just better not to really make them like remember it too much. But that's about the extent that most people stop at. So I really resonated with David's presentation's point about having to go back at it and having to look at it and try to accept it in order to heal from it in the long term. Kenji, do you have anything to say about David's presentation?
Yeah, thanks for all the information. It's been very interesting. I want to share that one of the things that I'm very impressed about Okinawan people is that even though they have like this very hard experience during the war, they didn't taught to the future generations about I don't know, they didn't want the future generations to talk bad about what happened. So I think that there was no, I don't know how to say that in English, resentment could be. And I think that Okinawa is still a place of peace. Many years has passed, and I think that all of us can think about Okinawa as a place that doesn't want any more conflicts. And I think these spaces we have here to share and to talk about the past will help us a lot to rethink about the future, about who we are, about what we have learned. And I think that maybe the responsibility of these generations could be knowing this past, knowing the traumas, the war, share it with others, but also try to promote peace, because I think that is part of our essence. I think during the history of Okinawa, it's been always like a diplomatic and a strategic place. in its own region, right? So I think it's part of us. Let's work on that, and let's keep promoting this very special message of peace, because not only in Okinawa, right? In Peru, in Colombia, in America, there are many difficult situations in which we had to be like promoters of peace, of love, and I think this is a very special event for doing this.
Yeah.
Kenji? Yeah. And sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think it's just great. Like, I think it's like you said, Kenji, to like look, like for us to do this as young people, to look into our past, and like through these kinds of events to kind of like almost like build our like connections together as we look into the past. It's like, because it's different to look at it like when I'm reading a book on my own, I say, oh yeah, look at the past of history. But when I'm with you all, it's like a different feeling, right? Like it's like there's some coherence, or there's like a more of a power that we have in groups when we look at it together, that we can feel. Like, I don't know how to explain it necessarily in words, but it's like, there's something different when we're here together. It's almost like there's like a sacredness, like you can feel it here, even just on this Zoom call. And like you said, Lima and Sean, like that kind of, yeah, like I think it does feel like a moment where, like, if we as young people can respond to this call to create the space for like your grandma, Sean, like that, it's like it's not even like it has to be like official or a government policy or something maybe, but that like we all have more room inside, so that when grandma does eventually want to speak, or even doesn't want to speak, it's like we have the room inside to say, yeah, we're here. Versus like if we are, I think one of the challenges of our generation is that if we're always on the phone and we just like are running around, then of course there's no space, because I have to watch Netflix. Like I can't, I don't have the room inside for grandma or for the elders. But I think that's like a beautiful thing about spaces like this, is that we can actually start to like set that intention and train ourselves to say, yeah, I think we can actually together train ourselves to be precise listeners and have the space to welcome those stories, or even just welcome the things that aren't spoken, yeah, when they don't share, but there's a room inside. And I'm interested in what we can, like, as we go forward, like young people, as we create spaces or groups or ceremonies or things like Uchinanchu no Hi, that like it's like a space that we're creating to like receive these parts of the past or stories or things like this. And I think that's a big part of our work, our generation.
Yeah, I completely agree in that, because Okinawa, ever since the war, has been doing so much and putting so much effort, communal effort, into revitalizing the Okinawan culture and traditional art forms. I think it's really important to also have a community effort to kind of go back and try to recognize the severity and the impact of collective PTSD as well. Does anyone else have comments on this one? What was this? Oh, okay. So before that, to the audiences, if you have any comments, suggestions, again, feel free to post them below and we'll talk about them, we'll discuss them. If you have any questions like what can individual people do, that's perfectly fine too. And there is a question. Okay, so Dr. Schultz asked, I had a question about whether there were organizations and support groups for survivors similarly in the United States, and if there were active platforms for survivors to teach from their experiences. So I think this is a really good question. As I kind of mentioned before, I think that Okinawan PTSD has been overlooked, but there are researches being done into analyzing and collecting materials from it. I know that for some World Heritage Sites, for some memorials in Okinawa for the war, there are some volunteers who go there every day and tell their story to visitors to share their experience and try to pass the memory on. But I don't think I know too much about that. So David, Linda, or Kenji, do you have any ideas or notes that you have?
ごめん、質問は、この PTSD の人たちになんかサポートしてあげるグループがありますかということになる？
そうですね。そう。アメリカにあるみたいに、この PTSD 回復のグループとか、そういう経験者たちが他の人に教えられる体験とかはないのですかって聞いて、一応、研究、姫ゆりの学徒隊とかの体験談はあるよっていう話をしたんですけど、何かありますかね
？But the purpose of the question is to like recover of the trauma of the victims or like that, no? The activity. As I know, I didn't find such activity, especially about the like to overcome the trauma of the battle of Okinawa or nor war experience of Japanese people. It's from my experience, from the film. When I worked in Colombia, because Colombia had a like long time conflict, so there are many like international NGO or like the national government also have the like peer counseling treatment for victims, or NGO also, and local government also have each level like among the community or national level many like treatment program they have for the war victims or conflict victims. But in case of Japan and Okinawa, no, just like to pay compensation, but this compensation also like just for the like family of the military, Japanese military or family who have a victim or who died in the war or like that because of to like contribute for the military or like that. So there are no treatment nor compensation for like victim of the trauma, nothing. And another point is when I knew the word victim, victim means like person who 日本語で難しいね。It's different of the Japanese language and English or Spanish, but in Japanese, victim means 被害者. We say 被害者, but 被害者 is なんだろう、experiencer or like who have a damage of something like some accident or war or like that. And another word is 犠牲者. 犠牲者 is who died or who died in incident, accident or war or like that. So 被害者 and 犠牲者 are different, but in English is the same victim. Then about the war, when we refer about the war of the victim of the war, in Japanese always say 被害者、戦争の被害者。So, 戦争の犠牲者ね。戦争の犠牲者。So, it means who died in the war. So, there is no the Japanese concept who hurt because of the war, or who hurt due to the war, like just say survivor or experiencer. So there is no like concept who still have pain today, or like or who had a shock at that time. Nine. So why? And I thought, sorry, なんか the 反対語って何だろう opposite word of the victim is perpetrator っていうなんていう加害者
Perpetrator.
perpetrator
Yes.
でしょ But I think in Japanese there なんか if we say なんか戦争の被害者なんか we have to say another point. So who is the perpetrator of the war でしょ So in Japan なんか there is no concept of that, because if we start to think about this, we have to なんか think a lot of things でしょ なんか responsibility of the government かimperial emperor system とか a lot of things of like なんか responsibility of the World War II of Japan ということ。So I think なんか there are limit because of the Japanese language concept to think about the real victims or who have a trauma of the war.
That's a very good point. ありがとうございます。David or Kenji, do you have anything to add to that or discuss about that?
I haven't heard about any of these groups.
I think it's interesting
Yeah.
because I think like what Lima's saying is like it is really interesting how different nations treat trauma, like right, like in like we all have our own characteristics of our own nations, right? Like our personalities, or what we could also call just collective traumas, like the way we see our own trauma is in fact traumatized often, right? Like we can't always see, or even it's like a collective response to not see, like so often like I hear these stories when I walk through Kaigungo. There's like a Japanese Navy park here that I walk through on my way to karate, and I walk through and there's so many ghost stories from there, right? And it's like there's always ghost stories there or down in Itoman by the caves where the mass graves were. And it's like there's these places that are like shut down almost. It's like there's scary stuff there, and we often don't, like we tell stories about ghosts, right? And we say, oh, don't go there, it's scary. And it's almost like there's an agreement that we make because it is scary. It is scary to see a ghost or to feel the heaviness of that place. But it's almost like also we do agree to say we're not going there. And we also agree that ghosts are scary, when in fact ghosts actually might be parts of ourselves that want to come back, just like trauma, that be integrated into our being so that we can be whole again. Because ghosts are always human, right? They're always a part of us. And it's almost like this disembodied part, like on a collective level, that like went out, and it was too much because there were too many people dying. It was just too horrific. And so the ghost is like this expression of our collective memory of that place. And they may be seen or whatever. And actually, I think if we look at it from the perspective of healing, actually the response would be to together go to the ghost. Like this is just an example, to go to that kind of image of the ghost and welcome and say, what are you trying to say? Like, what can you say to us that was never heard? Or, how can we welcome you back into the present so that you can rest in peace, like we often say. And I think it's just an interesting way that kind of, the different cultural adaptations we have to dealing with scary things and horrible things from our past. And I think we do see it in really distinct ways, like in here versus Germany has a really different response to what happened in the war. And the United States does as well. And often I think it also depends on, like, this is the other part of it, is it depends if we won or lost the war, right? Because Germany lost, clearly. And they have memorials all over Germany. And it's really interesting how their response is very different from Japan, which never really lost. I mean, it has never admitted to losing the war. And so it's just a different response. And America, of course, we keep winning. I mean, this is a problem maybe in the long term, right? That like America, we have not looked at our past. And on some level, that's because we haven't had to. And at the same time, we've had this kind of distance from war. We haven't had war on our homeland in so long. So we've actually had space to do a lot of research on trauma. Like, so much of the research on trauma comes from America, Harvard, the neuroscience program there, and medical doctors all over the US, because there's space. Like, we haven't had war in the moment. And it's different here in Okinawa, where we have, I've seen like 3 helicopters flying back and forth here. And so it's just interesting how these different kind of conditions are set. And at the same time, I think it just makes it more, and like even more important, that we together go to the places that are scary, and go to the ghosts, and go to the memorials, and follow the work of people like Governor Ota, and just the amazing work he did with the Peace Memorial. I think that's kind of our work to follow on. Yeah.
I really like the ghost and the scary stories part, and it's very symbolic to returning to the trauma and to recover from it. That was really an interesting point. So Kenji, I know that you live in, and you have a lot of experience with your grandfather, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of want to ask, on like an individual level, how much have you discussed about his experiences with your grandfather, and like individually, like what did you think of it? If you could share that.
Yeah. Well, actually, my grandfather, well, he was born in Okinawa, and he traveled to Peru about 1936, more or less, before the Second World War.
Okay.
He lived here all the rest of his life, right? So he didn't have this near experience of the war, but maybe I can share some things about Japanese migrants, the collective migrants here in Peru. We had a very difficult moment during the war here, because the government of Peru was like an ally with the United States. So all the Japanese that lived in Peru were like persecuted, and the locals were I don't know, violently stolen, and we had a very difficult moment here in Peru, right? But I think that, as I said before, one of the things that is very impressive of the Okinawan and Japanese people is not talking too much about the damages we had, right, in the past, because maybe the I don't know, the my father's generation or maybe older people know about these stories, but they don't want to share these traumas or these negative experiences, and they just like to look at the future and keep going and make their best to grow, to become better than before, right? And I think that's also something that although the people in the world admire of Japan, right? Because after the war, they lifted up very quickly, and now it's a very admired country. And I think that's what we have to do, not only as a collective movement, but also individually recognize these traumas or episodes, going, because there's something better that we can do after healing, right?
That's very true. And I think it could be that, you know, there's always been that mentality of nankurenaisa, but it's also that the post-war recovery didn't really provide time and opportunity for people to really stop in their place and look back. And even for my grandmother, out of the few things that she's told me, she told me that she was running from Nakagusuku to Yambaru, all the way up north, with her sister, her mother, her aunt, her family, but she got separated in battle, and she got along with another person who kind of helped her go north, but she was separated for a really long time. And when she was fortunately able to find her aunt in a camp, that's when she learned that her mother and her little sister had passed away in the battle. And ever since then, she's been mostly busy. She's never really had time to go back to school. She's been working most of her life, raising 4 children. I'm sorry. And so when I hear that kind of story, it really pains me to hear that such people experience such experiences. But I also think it's really important to feel that I didn't want to forget her story, and I kind of wanted to remember it, kind of pass it on, and to have that story strengthen my cultural ties to Okinawa, as you know, I live halfway across the world from it. So we should be wrapping up in
Sean,
a couple more minutes.
I want
Hey,
to
dozo.
a little, yeah. Thank you very much. And listening the comment from Sean and Kenji, I remembered about the features of the PTSD due to the Battle of Okinawa, and it's really reactioned your talk. The first feature of the PTSD of the Battle of Okinawa is it will happen in the later of their life of the victim. So as Kenji told, after the right after of the war, many people have to survive or are really busy or have a difficulty in their life. So long time they forget or put their memory of the war in bottom of the body. Then, but after when they become 70 or 80 years old, or after their children don't need to take care a lot, they become to remember their sad memories. So I think it's really similar situation the Peru, and as Kenji said, they also have another difficulties at riot of the local people to them. And when I was working in Peru in 2017, also I met several persons who has experience of the Battle of Okinawa. Like they are migrant to Peru from Okinawa, but then when they were child, they sent to Okinawa to get like education of Japanese style or Okinawa style with Okinawa community. But the Battle of Okinawa happened, so they have experience there. Then later they also like returned to Peru, but they couldn't share their war experience as a community. So they like put this memory only each person. Then when I had a conference about the Battle of Okinawa, he close to me and share their like sad story or memory. And the woman told me, elder woman told me, like she recently couldn't sleep well because of remembering the Battle of Okinawa's memory, like, and it's really typically a symptom of the PTSD of the Battle of Okinawa, right? But they don't know the experience of the PTSD of it, and it makes them more like isolate and sad. And you know, Okinawa has a Irei no Hi, is a memory day of the Battle of Okinawa. So every year we have a like anniversary ceremony to memorial ceremony to remember the victims or story of the Battle of Okinawa. Like we have an opportunity to share this experience as a community. But about the Okinawan migrant who have experienced the Battle of Okinawa, they don't know. They don't have this opportunity, and it's really more make them more difficult, make them isolate, and their family or even her grandchildren don't know like how Battle Okinawa was, and to from now on to support these people, our generation has to know how the Battle of Okinawa was. And another point of the PTSD of the Battle of Okinawa is the doctor said the trauma will inherit to next generation or other generations with changing its form. So our generation has no direct experience of the war, but since like listening or watching some materials about the Battle of Okinawa or like that, we learned how our Oji-chan, Oba-chan experienced in the war like that. Then or another situation like if we talk about the Battle of Okinawa, some person doesn't like this because make them sad or make them remember about the sad memories destroy their family and community also, make them damaged, make hurt them. Then with this like negative situation or negative landscape negative scenes, we like learned the Battle of Okinawa is like negative thing, more like with negative image. So it also make us and as a trauma ということ。And ごめん、ちょっと、little passing the time, but I also want to addition one more things. As Kenji and David talked today, like Okinawa has a possibility to make the peace from their point. I really agree this because recently in Okinawa they found a bone っていうか、難しいんだけど、there are like international activity to find the bones of the victims of the Battle of Okinawa, from Korea, Taiwan, and all over the Japan, because Okinawa was a battlefield. And during the war, many like Taiwanese and Koreans also forced to work as a soldier, Japanese soldier at that time. Then still today, they're born couldn't return to their land. So local people of Okinawa and Japanese people and Korean and Taiwan people gather together, and young generation also like working to find their body in Okinawa. So I think this is really important and like potential to like peace activity of Asia from Okinawa. So Okinawa has a really like severe experience with the Battle of Okinawa, but also now we have a big potential to create peace. Thank you.
It's so beautiful because I feel like what you shared, Lima, about like these like people here and in around Asia who are committed to retrieving these bones. Like, I mean, it's such a beautiful thing to do. Yeah. Like it's so like you can just feel the love that would inspire that kind of thing. And it sounds so much like what you said, Sean, about like you want to remember your grandma's story. Like it's something similar about going to retrieve those bones and like you wanting to sit down and say, yes, I want to remember. And it's like, it's not like a pleasant thing to go get bones or listen to these stories, but there is something that like I feel it and I feel, wow, there's something that in me that's like, wow, there's something so like a silence. Yeah. Like there's something so beautiful there that it's hard to explain, but it's like, wow, my whole body says, yeah, there's a fullness. Yeah, there's like an electricity, like when I hear those things.
No, it's really nice comment, and yeah, I really resonated with that. And I think with mentality of Bangkok Shinryo, I think Okinawa really has the potential to express peace as its core identity. But so we are out of time for Kurosu Yontaku. And so we will move on to Kenji's performance of Nuchi du Takara. So Kenji, if you are ready, or when you are ready, please take it away.
Okay, thank you. Well, this song is called Nuchi du Takara, and I wrote it after being in a conference about the Battle of Okinawa. So it inspired me a lot because it was very difficult to understand and to understand the moments after the war, right? So I hope you enjoy this song and spread the message of peace. ¿Será que algún día una bandera se alzará? No una que nos separe, sino blanca de la paz, y que en medio de recuerdos contrastados por el gris se pinten de mil colores esos sueños que vendrán. Porque se tuvo que pagar con el aliento de aquellos inocentes que ni el tiempo ni las lágrimas harán que estén de nuevo. Ya no luchar entre nosotros es insano, matar a aquel que puede ser tu hermano. Siembra hoy la paz con quien tienes a tu lado. La vida es un tesoro. ¿Será que algún día los disparos cesarán? No con silencio de muerte, con la calma de la paz, y que en medio de las balas y los gritos de dolor se escriban 1000 canciones de esperanzas que vendrán, porque se tuvo que pagar con el aliento de aquellos inocentes que ni el tiempo ni las lágrimas harán que estén de nuevo. Ya no luchar entre nosotros es insano. Matar a aquel que puede ser tu hermano. Siembra hoy la paz con quien tienes a tu lado. La vida es un tesoro. Itsu no hi ni ka takara bako akeyo, yurushi no kagi de heiwa ni kakaru hashi de, urami no moto e wa mou modoru koto wa nai. Satagai ni hoyo chikazuke yo kokoro wo. Dore dake ubaware no daro. Daisho wa fuku na mono tachi ka nakitsukare taro. Ano hi ni wa mou modorenai. Yame kiyoki no arasoi nado. Dare ka ga ubau no wa nika mo shizume yo ima. Katawara ni yasuragi yo. Nuchi du Takara. Nuchi du Takara. Nuchi du Takara.
Now, that was a wonderful performance, and it was very fitting to today's topic. And it was really nice hearing that. Thank you, Kenji. But, as we are a little bit over the time, but we are about to close for today. Does anyone else have any last words, closing comments to say?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was really great opportunity for me, and I want to continue kana motto motto. Nifei debiru.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Beautiful, Kenji. Thank you. Nihei debiru.
Thank you for this moment. I'm sure it will be a good message we all together will spread for future generations. And let's keep promoting peace and healing our hearts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it was great to be here. It was great to share the moment and kind of discuss together about how we can move forward and how we can start to look at the trauma in order to move towards the future. Okay. Oh, so the last bit, our next Miruku Yuntaku is going to be next year. We have not scheduled exactly when, but it will be after the New Year's. We will send announcements, we will send adverts when we have more determined. So please follow along. So this stream will be archived on this channel. You are free to watch it anytime after the stream ends. And all of the materials that we talked about today, including English version and the Japanese version, will be posted in the comments. Yeah, it's in the comments. So if you would like to take a look at that, and please feel free to do so. There will also be a survey available shortly after the stream. If you can enter the survey, please take a short time to answer what you felt about the stream, topics, discussion, and David's presentation or Kenji's performance. It would be greatly appreciated. Please remember to subscribe on YouTube, turn notifications on, follow on Facebook, all that. We probably have Instagram, follow that too. And would anyone else have anything to say before we end the stream? No? Okay, everyone's good? Everyone's all good. Okay. So Nishio-san, if you are ready. Okay. So thank you all again for coming to the stream today. Hope you had a great time listening in, and hope you can start thinking about the question for today, which is, what does Okinawa have for its future? Along with the context of David's presentation of collective trauma from the Battle of Okinawa. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully have a good day or night or wherever you're watching from. Thank you.
二平レベル。
またやったー。
ベニフェデビル。
チャオチャオ。
If you do.
Wait, Kenji, let's turn that for